Hi everyone, this is a first graders review video of the prisoners of geography. So we'll continue covering the USA geography. So here, when the Europeans first began to land and stay in the early 17th century, they quickly realized that the east coast of this virgin territory was packed with natural harbors and fertile soils. Okay, so these European settlers, they come to the America around like early 17th century. Okay, they start to come to America from early 17th century, and these Europeans, they quickly realized that the east coast of this virgin territory. So here virgin means new, right? So this new territory, America was packed with natural harbors and fertile soil. So it has really good quality resources in this land. So here was a place where they could live, and unlike their home countries, a place where they hoped they could live freely. So these Europeans, they hoped that European people, they could live in this land. They thought that the land is good enough to make their settlement here, and unlike their home countries, so their home country meaning like United Kingdom, Britain, they hope to live freely. So in this time, early 17th century, I guess United Kingdom was controlled by really a strict government, also controlled by a really strict English church, British church. So people wanted to have a more free life. So they moved to this new territory and hoped live in here for more freely. And their descendant would go on to deny the native inhabitant their freedom. But that was not the intention of the first settlers. So the descendant, descendant is the children, right? Next generation. Children of this first European immigrant, the descendant, they deny the native inhabitant their freedom. So before these Europeans arrived in America, the America was not empty, country was occupied with the native inhabitant, and these people, descendant of European immigrant, realize how good this country, the new territory is. So I guess these descendants deny the native inhabitants their freedom, meaning that descendant they drive out native Indians out of this land, and they like somehow limited the living area, living space of these native Indians. But that was not the intention of the first settlers. These first settlers, Europeans, when they first arrived in this America, they didn't intend to like drive out these native Indians, but the next generation, children, second generation, did something about the native Indians. And geography pulled them across the Atlantic in ever greater numbers. So since the geography of this new territory is so advantageous, so resourceful, more and more European immigrants realized that, and they more and more, the great numbers, more people just move to the new territory. The last of the original 13 colonies to be established was Georgia in 1732. So, out of 13 colonies, the last one was the Georgia, 1732. And the 13 became increasingly independently minded all the way up to the American Revolutionary War. So, when these 13 colonies first established in new territory, these colonies, they were quite obedient to European countries. They paid taxes well and they cooperated well to the British government, but they gradually recognized that they realized that they are quite independent. They don't have to, obey these European countries. They don't have to pay taxes. They realize because they are living in a separate area, separate territory, and people start to asking question why we are paying taxes to these European people. So they became more independent minded and end up having war against each other. So the American Revolutionary War. So at the beginning of this period, the colonies, which gradually began to connect to each other, stretched 1,000 miles from Massachusetts in uh, the north down to Georgia and had an estimated combined population of 2.5 million people. Okay, so let me just briefly draw the map. Okay. So here, Massachusetts, around like 13 colonies. They built, the first one is Massachusetts, and they built like 13 other colonies, and last one around like Georgia here in 1732, and down to Georgia here, right? Georgia, and had estimated combined population about 2.5 million people. So from Massachusetts to Georgia area, they have 2.5 million people, and distance like from here to here is like 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles. And they were bounded by the Atlantic to their east side and the Appalachian Mountain to their west. So to east side of this colony, they have Atlantic, right? They have the Atlantic Ocean, and to their west, they have the Appalachian Mountains. Appalachians. Yeah. So the Appalachians, 1,500 miles long, are quite impressive, but compared to the Rockies, not particularly high. So we have Rockies in the west side. So if you compare Appalachian with Rockies, Rocky Mountain is higher than the Appalachian, but this Appalachian is 1,500 miles long, which quite difficult geography to overcome for this population. So nevertheless, they still formed a formidable barrier to westward movement for the early settlers who were busy consolidating what territory they had subdued and preparing to govern it themselves. So they here, even though Appalachian Mountain is not higher than the Rockies, the Appalachian Mountain, still forms a formidable barrier. Okay, a formidable, it means adversary, or means difficult. So Appalachian Mountain forms a adversary barrier to westward movement for early settlers. It means that it was difficult for early settlers to go the west side of Appalachian Mountain. Appalachian was high enough and adversary enough for these people to overcome. So these people who are busy consolidating. So consolidating here means unifying. So these early settlers, they have these 13 colonies to unify. So this like making a settlement in this East Coast area, it was a big enough task, big enough challenge for these people. It was big enough job to do. And with what territory they had subdued, so they have controlled. And preparing to govern it themselves. So only caring about these 13 colonies in the eastern seaboard was busy enough and big enough challenging for these people, so they couldn't really go to the west side of Appalachian Mountain. So plus this was a natural barrier. Atlantic and the Appalachian Mountain is a natural barrier for the early immigrant, so they cannot go out of this eastern coast. There is another barrier. The colonists had another barrier. This one is a political one. The British government forbade settlement west of the Appalachian as it wanted to ensure that the trade and taxes. So this British government, they forbade, right? British government prevent this settlement from going over to the west of the Appalachians. That way, it was more convenient for British government to control the trade and imposing taxes for these people here. So if this immigrant remained on the eastern seaboard, it was more convenient for British government to control tax and the trade. So British government forbade these people from going over to the west side of Appalachian Mountains. The Declaration of Independence states when in the course of a human event it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political band which have connected them with another and to assume the power of the earth, a separate and equal station to which the law of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect the opinion of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So anyway, the American government, they had a war and they had a battle against the British government and American government successfully announced Declaration of Independence. And it says that when in the course of a human event, so in the course of a human event means when we live our lives when we live our life, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political band which have connected them with another. So sometimes it becomes necessary to dissolve, right? To cut or to melt. Political band. Sometimes you need to cut your political band, political unity, which have connected them with another. So sometimes it becomes necessary to cut your political unity with your partner and to assume the power of the earth. And instead of the political unity, you need to begin the power of the earth. And the power of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. So this power of nature, the powers of the earth and the law of nature and of nature's God entitled. Entitle means to give. So the power of earth give this American government a equal status. Therefore, this American government will cut the political unity with Britain and they will begin the power of the earth, which give them a equal status with British government. At the early stage of a European settlement in America, USA had lower position and United Kingdom had higher position. Because the proof is that the US paid tax to United Kingdom, so it proves that the United Kingdom held a relatively high position, but now they're cutting this political relationship with United Kingdom and they are beginning this power of the earth and they are arguing that they have an equal status with Britain and a decent respect to the point of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So a good respect, decent respect of the mankind requires, in order to show a good respect to all the mankind, whether you are British, whether you are American, whether you are Asian, whether you are African, in order to show a good respect to all the mankind requires they should declare the causes. So the cause is the reasons. They should declare the reason which impel them. So impel, which force them to the separation, to the independence. So it basically means that the power of the earth give American government equal status with Britain. And also this American government is declaring the causes, the reasons, which the power of the earth forced them to declare that independent from the other country. And it also goes on to outline at some length those causes. So here it refers to the Declaration of Independence. So this Declaration of Independence go on to outline. Outline here. Outline is explain. And to state also similar meaning. Explain. So this Declaration of Independence explains those causes, those reasons why American government is declaring the independence. Also, it explains that it was clear, self-evident, that all men were created equal. So it is very clear that all men were created equal. But it's quite irony. It is quite irony because with no hint of slave owning irony. Here in this Declaration of Independence, there is no saying, no mentioning of slave owning irony. So in this time, 1776, America, they owned slave. They owned slave from Africa, and they didn't mention anything about this slaves equality, slaves human right. Even though they are saying that all men were created equal, they didn't say anything about the right of the slave of this country. And these noble sentiments helped to fuel the victory in the War of Independence, which in turn gave birth to a new nation state. So these noble sentiments here, so the noble means respectful. For sentiment is the idea, right? This noble sentiment. So the noble sentiment refers to the cause, reason why they declared independent, and this cause, in terms of contents, it refers to all men were created equal. So this idea, this respectful idea that all men were created equal, helped America to fuel the victory in the War of Independence, and which in turn gave birth to a new nation state. So this idea also helped to establish a new free country. Okay, so I guess this is where we finished last time. So we'll stop here and we'll continue our lesson next time. And thank you for participation, everyone. So thank you again and see you next time. Okay, bye bye. Bye.